So when you think of Apple, you probably picture a slick product launch, right? A brand new iPhone, that iconic logo. But once a year, they have to put out something different. A document that isn't about marketing, but about the cold, hard facts. Today, we're cracking open Apple's official annual report, the Form 10K, to see how the company really sees itself, its money, and yeah, its biggest fears.
We're going to break this down into 5 key parts. First, we'll look at how Apple presents itself to the world, its official story. Then, we'll follow the money to see what's really making the cash registers ring. After that, we get to the juicy stuff, what keeps Apple's top execs up at night. Then, we'll zoom right in on the massive legal war over the App Store. And finally, we'll put it all together to figure out what this all means for Apple's future, and, of course, for us.
Okay, let's get right into it. Our first section is all about how Apple formally presents its empire to investors and to the government. This is their official self-portrait. First things first, what even is a Form 10K? Yeah, don't picture some glossy brochure. This is a legally required report they have to file with the SEC, which is basically the government's financial watchdog. And because they have to be truthful and they have to cover everything, these documents are one of the absolute best places to find the unvarnished truth about how a company is doing, and more importantly, its biggest risks.
All right, so the basics. In the 10K, Apple neatly sorts its whole empire into these 5 big buckets. You've got the hardware heavyweights we all know and love: iPhone, Mac, and iPad. Then there's the fast-growing category of wearables, home, and accessories. But the one you really want to watch, and we're about to see why, is services. That's the whole shebang: the App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, even their advertising business.
And that leads us perfectly into our second section, following the money. I mean, we all know Apple is a financial giant, but where does that nearly $400 billion in annual revenue actually come from? Let's take a look at the numbers.
Okay, so this table is pulled straight from the report. And wow, it tells a heck of a story. Just let your eyes go to that top line. iPhone, over $200 billion, but then look at the change. 0%, totally flat. Now look down at iPad and wearables. They actually went down. But then you hit this line, services, a massive 13% jump. That right there, that's the company's real growth engine. And this chart just puts that whole shift into crystal clear perspective. The iPhone is still king, no question about it. It's more than half the entire pie. But just look at that big blue slice for services. At almost a quarter of all revenue, it is the undeniable number 2, leaving Mac, iPad, and wearables way, way behind. Let's just pause on that number for a second. $96 billion. To put that into perspective, Apple's services division, all by itself, now makes more money than the Mac and iPad businesses combined. It's a titan hiding inside a titan. So, the money looks fantastic, especially in services, but that's only half the story. Now we get to the part of the 10K called risk factors. This is where Apple is legally required to tell investors everything that could possibly go wrong. And let me tell you, this is where it gets fascinating. And this quote just sets the tone perfectly. It's basically Apple's lawyers saying, hey, yes, we've done incredibly well, but please do not assume that's just going to continue automatically. It is a huge contrast to the super confident image Apple usually projects, and it's a mandatory warning to anyone looking at the company's future. And here we can see 2 of the biggest external threats that Apple is really worried about. On one side, you've got this brutal global competition, with rivals constantly copying their features and slashing their prices. And on the other, a super fragile supply chain. Apple admits that for some key parts, they depend on a single supplier, which makes them incredibly vulnerable to shortages and price hikes. And believe me, the list goes on. The report also flags risks from global politics, the constant pressure to keep coming up with the next big thing, their dependence on key leaders like Tim Cook, the difficulty of maintaining their unique culture with over 160,000 employees, and, as we're about to see, the massive threat of losing in court. And that last point, the threat of losing in court? Yeah, that one deserves its own section, because one legal fight gets a ton of attention throughout the 10K. The high-stakes battle over the App Store.
Before we dive in, let's get on the same page with a key term here: antitrust. Basically, these are laws designed to stop any single company from becoming so powerful that it can just crush all the competition and end up hurting customers. And right now, regulators all over the world are using these laws to take a hard look at Apple's business.
So, the 10K lays out a few major war fronts. First up, you've got a massive lawsuit from the U.S. Department of Justice itself, accusing Apple of being a monopoly. Then there's the long-running, bitter fight with Epic Games, the makers of Fortnite, over App Store fees and rules.
And third, there's a powerful new law in Europe, the Digital Markets Act, that is already forcing Apple to open up its ecosystem in ways it has never, ever done before.
Okay, so let's connect all these dots. We've seen the products, the booming services revenue, the internal list of fears, and the giant storm of lawsuits. So what? In our final section, let's read between the lines and figure out what this all really means.
So after digging through all of this, what's the one big story this document tells? Well, I think it's a story of a fundamental conflict. It reveals a company that's living in two completely different realities at the exact same time.
And here it is, the core takeaway. On one hand, you have this absolute financial powerhouse, almost $400 billion in sales, a ridiculously profitable services division, and a literal mountain of cash. But on the other hand, spelled out in the very same document, you have a company that is completely under siege, battling governments, fending off competitors, and being forced to change the very way it does business.
And look, this isn't just some abstract boardroom drama. This stuff has real-world consequences for every single person who uses an Apple product. These legal battles could completely change how you get apps on your iPhone. They could affect how much you pay for those apps and subscriptions. Apple itself warns that these changes could weaken the security and privacy protections it's famous for. And ultimately, all this pressure is going to shape the very future of Apple's innovation.
So when you strip away all the marketing, what the 10K really reveals is a corporate giant that, for all its power and all its wealth, is carefully navigating a minefield of immense and, in some cases, truly existential risks. This isn't just a financial report, it's a map of the battlefield.
Which leaves us with the big question. Apple has built this incredible fortress of products, services, and loyal customers over the decades. But with governments, regulators, and competitors all laying siege to the castle walls, the question is, can that fortress withstand the coming storms?